There we go. All right, so I'll say that again so these people can hear it. So this message is designed to help you get a little bit more of a handle on that stress, whether that stress comes from something in your personal life, something academically, whatever it is. The objective of this message is to help you feel a little bit better. But first, I want to give you some perspective on stress, and so I think perspective and your mindset oftentimes has a lot to do with how we respond to things and kind of how we react to things and just how we're feeling about things. And so when it comes to stress, stress is not a matter of circumstance, it's actually a matter of perception. All right. So when you actually think about it, a certain circumstance isn't really stressful, right? And that's because, and the reason, like a good example of that is something happening to one person could be stressful, and the same thing happening to another person could not be stressful, right? And it's the same exact thing. So, for example, certain people are stressed out by something in school versus other people aren't, and so the difference isn't that it's not the different circumstance. It's not the circumstance itself that's stressful. It's how the person is reacting and responding to that circumstance. It's the perception you have toward whatever is making you stressful, right? So, stress is simply a response. Stress is something you decide to be. It's not actually it's something you choose to be. You choose to be stressed, and it's based on your reactions to things. And so, the idea of this message is to help you kind of understand that, but also to help you learn how to respond differently to stress and how to handle and manage that stress, so it no longer becomes stress and it just becomes, something that you are equipped to handle and whatnot. So the solution to stress, oftentimes, I would almost say all the time, is not to just do less stuff, right? I think the way average people respond is if they're like, oh, I'm stressed, it's like, okay, well, let me take something off my plate. And I don't really think that's the solution. In fact, how many of you guys have ever kind of like said that? You were like, oh, I'm stressed, I just need to do like nothing for a day. Has anyone ever done that to like cool down? You're just like, I'm going to do nothing for a day. How many of you guys actually feel worse after you do nothing for a whole day? It's like you feel more tired, right? You feel groggy, you feel less motivated, you feel crappy because you weren't productive, and you're like, what the heck did I just do with my last 24 hours, right? It almost never makes you feel better to just eliminate everything, do less, or do nothing at all. The way to handle stress is simply to manage it better, right? And so the idea of this power hour here is to help you learn to manage your time, and I think managing time is something that we probably all have learned to do through Vector. If you were at COC, Colin, I think it was, gave a great time management talk, and that's probably one of those things Kate was saying earlier. This isn't, for some of you, maybe like oh, I've never heard this idea before. It's more of like oh yeah, like I know this, but I'm just not doing it sort of a thing. And so I want to help us actually get to plan out our time and manage our time together. The interesting thing about time is it's the most important resource that we have. However, people don't treat it like it's the most important resource. Time is not an infinite thing. Time is finite, right? The nice thing about it is we all have the same amount of time in a day. It's just about how you use that time. And most people don't treat it like it's our most important resource. Most people don't actually plan out their time, right? And so when it comes to planning out your time, it's the most important thing you can do. In any given week, any month, any day, it's the most important thing that you can do. Think about like an analogy of going to a restaurant, right? So when you go to a restaurant, you sit down, and what's the first thing you do? You open up your menu, and what are you doing? You're deciding what you're going to get, right? You're planning out your next like hour to 90 minutes at a restaurant, right? First, you're like, okay, well, what do I want to get to drink? All right. And then you like talk with the people you're with, and you're like, hey, what do you think about an app? Should we like get something to share? Are you feeling appetizers, right? You plan out your appetizers. Then you're like figuring out what your entree is going to be. And sometimes you even decide if you're going to get dessert. Maybe that decision comes a little bit later. But most people, like, we'll probably sit there for like 10 minutes at the beginning of our time at a restaurant planning out our experience there, planning out our next like 90 minutes, right? Yet people, something as trivial as going to a restaurant and deciding what you're going to eat, we plan that, yet we don't even plan out our entire day most of the time, right? And so imagine if you treated your day like you treated how you go to a restaurant, right? If you spend 90 minutes at a restaurant and you spend 10 minutes of it planning, that's 10% of the time you spend there that you're planning. So imagine if you spent that portion of your day planning. Now, I don't know that we all have 2.5 hours to plan out our day, and it certainly doesn't take 2.5 hours to be a productive person and to manage your stress. But if we just spent a fraction of our time, either at the end of the day planning for the next day, the beginning of the day, if you're a morning person and you want to do it then, imagine what that could do for your life. Imagine what that could do for your stress levels. Imagine what that could do for how productive you are, right? And it's a really simple concept. It's just not easy to do. It takes discipline. We've heard that word a couple of times today. So I want to make sure that we can work on this together and we can do all of this together. So when it comes to your time, the biggest mistake you can make is to not plan it out, right? The biggest mistake you can make is just saying, oh, I've got this. I can think on the fly, or I can have more time tomorrow, or next week I'll be less busy, so I'll have more time to do things then. And that's the biggest mistake you can make when it comes to time. It's the first thing to go. Planning is the first thing to go, but it's the most important thing that you need to stay, right? So it's the first thing to go, but it's the most important thing to stay in your schedule.
Nugget.
Golden nugget. So when you feel more stressed, when you feel more overwhelmed, when you feel disorganized, when you feel like you're behind, when you feel like there's more things to do than you have time to actually complete, the answer is always to plan. The answer is always to plan, right? You guys have probably heard us say this before, but the most important meeting or the most important appointment you keep with yourself every day or every week, the most important meeting or appointment you keep every day or every week is with who? Yourself, right? It's with yourself. I think it was Ben Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Right? So we're going to do, like I said earlier, we're going to do a power hour. And how many of you guys have heard of that concept of like a planning power hour before? A couple of you guys? Cool. Awesome. So we teach this oftentimes at our COC, and you may have heard it elsewhere too. But our goal in this next little bit here is to gain some clarity on what you have going on and lower your stress levels just because you have more of an idea of how to fit it all in, right? We want to make sure everyone here has a plan. And in the next, we have about 30 minutes or so that we're going to work on this. We're probably not going to get it all done, but I want to at least get you guys started and walk you through this idea of planning out your time, planning out your schedule, this idea of a power hour. So when it comes to a power hour, I like to do this weekly, all right? There are 168 hours in a week. This takes one of them, all right? Just one. Watch 2 fewer episodes of Netflix and do a power hour, right? Sleep 1 hour less and do a power hour. Whatever it is, do a power hour. I like to do mine weekly. You could do it whatever day makes the most sense for you. So for me, I like to do mine on Sundays because it's kind of like the end. It's the end of the Vector week. It's not quite the end, but it has allowed me to kind of get some clarity on like how my office is doing or did that week so far. But it's also the beginning of the next like Monday through Friday week, and it allows me to kind of set my schedule up for that. So I do mine on Sundays. Whatever day makes the most sense for you guys, you can do. Sometimes I did them on Saturdays when I was in college, and I planned out my weekend and then my next week. So whatever makes the most sense, but we're going to do one right now. And I'm going to walk you all through the steps of a power hour. So for those of you guys who've heard of this concept or learned this from us, anyone know what the first step of a planning power hour is? Matt?
To get like the big stuff, so like your big tests, like your big things that you know you have due, like coming up, like that's the main thing you want to put in your schedule first. Just kind of like calling all them like the big rocks, like,
Yeah.
like just the things that are like really big.
Yeah. That aligns with like you're right on track though. That's how you're gonna like put it in your schedule. That's like more in step 2 though. But I like exactly the way you're thinking. That's like prioritizing too. We're gonna go over that. Anyone else have a guess what the first step is in a planning power hour? Okay, yeah, so you probably need some stuff to do this, right? If you guys have your planners, I'm going to do this with you. I got my planner right here. I'm old school, pencil to paper. Do it right here.
Planner. I'm so happy.
Yeah, I saw it. I love getting new planner. It's like one of my favorite things. Kate's got her planner. If you're someone that does this on like your Google Calendar, your iCal, whatever it is, you can take that stuff out. So yeah, you kind of need some like basics to be prepared. But when we're actually like sitting down and doing the planning power hour, anyone want to take one last guess what it is?
John handed out a paper schedule today.
You can
for the
take that
older
out too,
folks. So
yep.
If you don't have, you could use that for right now if you didn't have yours with you.
Yeah.
Or just like the old school one on your, or put it in there.
Does this office have an eraser?
I think there's one up there.
Oh yeah, thank you.
The first place I start is mental download.
That's it. First step of a planning power hour is mental download. So typically when you're doing a mental download, you want to be like, you want to eliminate all distractions. So when I do my mental download, I like to turn off like my computer. I put my cell phone down. It's like quiet. I want to, be away from people. Obviously, we're in a group doing this right now, so we're not going to be able to be completely alone. But I like to eliminate distractions, and so the purpose of a mental download is to get it all down, right? Have you guys ever felt like you have so much on your mind? You're just like, I can't keep track. I have so many things to do. Like that feeling, the mental download gets it all out there, right? And so for a few minutes, I'm going to help you guys do a mental download. So your goal, you can do it in list format. You can make categories of things, personal things, vector things, school things, whatever it is, you can do it that way too. We're going to take about 5 minutes or so, and we are just going to do a mental download. So your goal is to write down anything that's on your mind that you need to do, right, in the next week to month. You can even write down, right? Your goal is to write down everything that you need to do, anything that's on your mind in the next week or month or so.
I write down personal stuff, I write down business stuff, I write down school stuff, get it all down. Some of the things on my list is schedule my next oil change, book a dermatology appointment, right?
So I'll give you guys some categories too.
Some are certain things business wise, making sure we sign up the last couple people for Olean. I added ACE to my list. You hadn't heard about the conference yet, right? That's one thing on my mental download. So anything and everything that you need to do, write it down. Paper that's due next week, an exam that you need to study for, a thank you card you need to send, a birthday gift you need to buy, flu shots on my list.
I write down there all the random thoughts that pop in my head too, and just getting it all out quiets things down.
Oh, you mean no, okay.
So if you're a student, think of everything you need to get done for school in the next little bit, right? Papers that are due, even papers you know about. Maybe they're not due for a few weeks, but papers that you know about. If you don't know what's due, check your syllabus for each class. That might be something you write down. Study for an exam. I would even write down what you need to study. So study chapters 5 through 7 for biology. Right. Do homework number 5 for psychology. Try to be really specific with it. If it's a professor you need to go talk to. It's a project you need to work on. If you need to text groups to group mates to get a project going. In school related, but maybe just extracurricular stuff. So maybe not stuff related to grades, but do you need to plan out something to talk about at a club meeting maybe that you're doing for a group you're a part of? Do you need to plan something for a club? Do you need to do something for a club or an organization? Can even think about life stuff, right? So do you need to call mom? Do you need to call dad? Do you need to do your laundry? Clean your room. You guys are yeah. right? Do you need to go to the gym? Do you need to go grocery shopping? You're welcome, yeah. Do you need to like plan like to go get coffee with like a friend you haven't seen in a little while? Do you need to plan something with like a significant other? If you have like a best friend that goes to college away, do you need to plan like FaceTime? And you can think about vector stuff too, right? So some of the things we've talked about here, a lot of the things Leah walked us through, those are probably things that could go on a mental download. We have the Olean push coming up. Do you need to get like your previous customer list together? You're going to send emails. Do you need to build up your list a little bit? Do you need to schedule a PC with your manager to talk about your plan? Do you need to practice the interview? You need to like schedule to run an interview in your local office to get some practice? Do you need to talk to professors about not being in class on Friday for Olean? Get it all down. Last couple seconds to do this mental download. Does anyone want to share? So after doing this, how does it make you feel? Like, how do you feel now that you've kind of just like written all this stuff down? Kind of like releases a little bit of weight off your shoulders, right? Now, sometimes you can look at the list and it's still a little daunting, right? I get that. That's where the next like step comes in, right? Some of you guys were like scribbling the whole time, right? You look at your list and you're kind of like, wow. But the nice thing about it is now it's not up here, it's on paper, right? So you don't have to like worry, you don't have to waste energy remembering what you need to do, remembering what's coming up, remembering deadlines for things, like forgetting about something important, you know. I always keep a list with me, or I'll just like type random things in my phone. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do this. Like I'll be running training and my group's role playing, and I'm just like, oh, I need to, you know, text this person. I like write them down, you know. And I always try to write it down because then I just don't have to remember it. I don't have to waste energy on doing that, right? But now you kind of at least have that weight off your shoulders of remembering it, and we can try to figure out what comes next. Sometimes when I do a mental download, right, sometimes the list is really long for sure, but sometimes I do a mental download and I look at it and I'm like, that doesn't actually seem that bad, you know? Some of you guys might look at your list and that's what you're looking at right now. You're like, oh, I don't actually have as much to do as I really thought that I had to do, right? And sometimes that's the way it feels when you do a mental download. But that's the first step, is just get it all out there, write down everything that you need to do. And the second step is similar to what Matt was saying, is to prioritize it. All right, so the second step is to prioritize it. All right, so we're going to put a 1, a 2, or a 3 next to everything on your mental download. All right, so 1 is urgent and important. All right, so 1 is urgent and important. If anyone remembers last month we talked about 7 habits of highly effective people, right? The quadrants, this is what that's from. So urgent and important is like, it's important and it's very near, right? It's like right there, it's due soon, whatever it is. So if you have an exam like Monday, right, that you need to study for, that would be an urgent and important thing, right? If there's like a deadline for something that you need to submit, right? So someone on my team is applying to be an RA next semester, right? That's a deadline. It was due like it's due Monday, right? That is an urgent and an important thing if he's like not done with it, right? So anything that's urgent and important, that gets a 1. If you have assignments due on Monday, whatever the case is, that's an urgent and important. A 2 is an important but not urgent. Right? So if you have something due, like a paper due next Friday, perhaps, right? Or like the following Monday, that would be an urgent or an important thing. Ranks high in importance, you need to get it done. However, it's not urgent, and you don't have to like freak out. You don't have to worry about it necessarily right now, right? So urgent, important, but not urgent is a number 2. All right, and then a number 3 is not important, not urgent, or like not that important. Right, so things like, you know, if you had like laundry on your list, that's probably like a number 3, unless you're like literally wearing your last outfit right now. Which some of you, that might be the case, but. Right, so not important, not urgent, or it can just be stuff that's like very far away. So if it's like, oh, I have a group project like that's due at the end of the semester, right? That might not be like a super important thing or urgent thing for like right now. You still have like maybe 2 months to start thinking about that, right? Well, so your goal is now to put a 1, a 2, or a 3 next to everything that was on your mental download. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. You have a question? Yeah.
What if it's urgent and not important?
I don't
Is it like
What is-
0.5 before 1?
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe before 1.
I mean, if it's not important, like, I don't know.
Or just don't do it?
Yeah. I don't know, do you want to share? Do you
Just don't do
mind
it.
sharing what it is?
Like a bunch of things. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like, I'm tired, take a nap. Like it's urgent.
That's urgent.
But and I didn't just say that.
Perfect.
I didn't say that just because you said you're a napper. Like, I feel the same way all the time. I'm a professional napper, professional sleeper. So good at it. Yeah. Can fall asleep like that. But yeah. What'd you say?
You think she's joking?
Oh, how I nap.
I'll be like, my eyes, mouth,
Yeah.
everything. Everything.
Yeah, you just kind of have to like determine if they're like really super like gonna be crucial to
That's urgent.
you like getting stuff done or quality of your day or whatever the case may be. What I think what is his name? Stephen Covey, the guy who did the 7 Habits, like urgent, not important. He classifies as things like an email or like a text message that pops right on your screen or like a notification you were tagged in or something like that. And those are things that are definitely like not something you have to worry about like in the moment if you can avoid it, you know. So I don't know what your things are, but I got you.
Like if I
That's a good
signed up
question.
to play a dodgeball game like on Monday, it's coming up. It's not that important. Like it could just something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For example.
Yeah, that's a good example. So, I mean, yeah, I think when you, like, kind of plan out your schedule, it's like, all right, well, if I have time to do all my, like, urgent and important things, and my important things that aren't urgent aren't going to become urgent if I put them off. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Then, yeah, sure, you know. But if it's also something that's important to you, then it's you know. Mm-hmm. Every time I hear dodgeball, I think of the movie. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
That is crazy. Launches range.
Awesome. All right, so now that we've prioritized, right, the next step is to put it all together in the plan, right? So this is a little bit more of like what you were talking about, Matt, is putting it all together, all right? And so there's a certain way, there's a way you want to put your schedule together. So if you have the thing John passed out, or you have your actual planner, you can take that out of your computer. I also printed out, so I like looking at my monthly snapshot as well as my weekly snapshot. So I printed out monthly calendars. Does anyone want? I have October and November in here. Cool, Becky. Could I put you in charge of planning? It's just divided like that. If anyone wants their hand raised. If you need the monthly calendar, Becky will help you out with it. Cool. And so I like looking at my whole month first. Yeah, so it's like they're like divided, yeah, and it's got October, November, because we're kind of right in the middle of October. So as she's passing those out, the things that I like to put in my month. All right, so I don't know that we're gonna have time for you guys to like map out your whole like rest of October and all of November. But I'll tell you guys kind of how I do it, and this could be like a follow-up that you do with yourself. But any ideas of things that you want to focus on in terms of putting in like the monthly snapshot? Any guesses? Okay, so like places you might be going. So if you have like an Olean trip, if you have like a vacation that's planned, you know, maybe this is like winter break or summer, or just something you're going to visit a friend at another college, school related, what would you put in the monthly calendar? Okay, yeah, so like that's like a personal, like doctor's appointments and things like that. Yeah, like exams for school, when big projects are due, papers are due. Joe?
I was just going to say, like, anything that really relates to the job. Like, for me, it's like, fix my car. So
Yeah.
I have a way to get to the office.
Yeah. So I like, absolutely, I like putting the things in the month that are like, that they have like a specific date assigned to them, right? Like I need to know that they're coming. There are things I might need to plan for. How many of you guys have ever like, a test like snuck up on you? Has that ever happened to anyone in here? You like wake up and you're like, someone, who was telling me this the other day? I don't remember who it was. It was you. You were like, oh, I woke up and I thought maybe I had an exam, and then I did. Oh, no, this was a completely different thing. Okay, yeah, so it's like you wake up, you get to class, and the teacher's like, no, it was Evan. He was like, I showed up and I thought, oh man, maybe I have an exam, but then wait, the professor moved it, right? Like when you look at your whole like couple months of a snapshot, that eliminates that happening, because if you just look at it and you plan it all out ahead of time, right, then you just know what's coming up. You can look at it. You don't have to look at a syllabus for 5 different classes. It's just all in one place, right? And you can plan ahead of time. We're gonna do the weekly schedule for together though. So when it comes to the weekly schedule, we're gonna try to plan out next week. All right. Matt mentioned the first thing to put in that schedule are your big rocks, right? Your big rocks are things that you can't move. They're things you can't change the time. Like there's no flexibility with them, right? What's a good example if you're a student? Class, right? You can't really be like, Professor, I don't like this 9 a.m. start time. Can we move it back to 11? Like, you want to teach it twice? I'll show up at noon though. You know, you can't really do that. It might be things like a phone jam, right? If you're local to your office and you're actively selling and stuff like that. It's a club meeting. So if you are, like I know some of you guys are in fraternities or sororities, so when you have your like meetings for that, if you're in other extracurricular activities, if you're on a sports team and you have practices, right? Those are usually like a set time each week and very important to be at. So take like 1 or 2 minutes, and on that weekly schedule, whether you're using the one John passed out or you're using a planner, doing it on your computer, go ahead and put in your big rocks. If they're already in there and you are on top of it. Another thing that's usually a big rock is if you go to like church or like a place of religion every week, right? You go to church every Sunday or something like that. That would be a big rock that's important to have in there. So when I'm planning out the weekly schedule, if you want to like buy a planner or you're going to do it on your computer or something, I recommend having something that shows me at least 30-minute intervals. So the one John passed out has 30-minute intervals on it. My planner that I bought has 15-minute intervals in it, so I prefer the 15-minute one, but I like the at least 30-minute intervals. For me, an hour is too spaced out just because some things, like, it's very rare that I have things that are like an hour-long increments. Like, I usually have a lot of things that are kind of different. Right, so for me, in my schedule, like, my big rocks are like training, so I don't move the times of training every week. Like, that for me is something that's in my schedule as a big rock. Leadership Academy, I have a call with Kate every week that I don't move. Things like PDI, from like a manager perspective, those are my big rocks. Raise your hand if you're still working on the big rocks. A couple of you, cool. Give you 1 or 2 more minutes. Once you're done with the big rocks, then you got to put in your small rocks, all right? Now, your small rocks are going to be the things that you, like, prioritize, all right? Those are usually the things that are on your mental download, because a lot of the things that you have to do, you don't always have to do them at, like, a certain point in time, right? Like, studying is flexible, going to the gym is flexible, all right? So your small rocks, these are the things that you prioritize first and foremost as your ones, all right? Your urgence and your importance. All right, and then when you get all of those things mapped out in there, then you can start putting in your twos. When you're really good at time management is when you don't have ones and your twos don't become ones, if that makes sense, right? So, like, ideally is you never operate from a place of, like, oh my gosh, I have something that's important and urgent because I, like, put it off or I'm behind or whatever the case is. Really where you want to operate is you can do important things when they aren't urgent, right? So that's essentially like you're not procrastinating, you've made a plan, you're on top of it, you're not putting out fires, right? You can focus more on them, you're not stressed by them. So little rocks are your things like studying, all right? Now, when you get really good at planning out your study time is when you don't just write studying, okay? Raise your hand if this has happened to you. You've gone to the library, you were there for like 5 hours, you're studying, and you walk out and you're like, I read 1 page of my textbook. I got like nothing done. Has that ever happened to anyone in here, right? Yeah, it's cool. It happened to me too. So what I like to do when I'm planning out like my study time is I like to write in there, well, what am I going to study, right? So if I'm going to have 3 hours to do homework, like let's say I end class at 2 and then I'll like get dinner around, I don't know, like 6. So let's say I'm going to put like 3 hours of study time in there. I'll put, okay, I'm going to read a chapter for this class. I'm going to do the problem set that I have for this class, and like that should take me roughly 3 hours. And what that does is it gives that study time purpose, right? It keeps you on task. So that way you're not like studying, but actually really watching Netflix instead, right? So you might not be able to do all that right now. You might need like some resources, you know, like look at what's due in your classes and whatnot. But I recommend when you're planning out your studying time, don't just say you're going to go study, say what you're going to study. You might not get it all done. Sometimes, you know, we can be a little bit ambitious, but it's going to keep you more on task than if you're like, oh, I'm just going to like go do work, because then you have no idea what you're doing, right? Other things that are little rocks could be like if you need to go to office hours for a professor, right? If you need to go like meet with a professor or like schedule a meeting with like an advisor or something like that, those tend to have a little bit of flexibility to them. It could even be like group meetings. Those are your small rocks as well, so those tend to have flexibility. Right? Demos, those are little rocks, right? Those are in this category too, when your demo times are going to be. Those have some flexibility, right? You saw John's. John's were like Saturday afternoons and then Sundays, like Sunday afternoons, right? So those are your demo times. All right, so you get your small rocks. The next step is to put in the sand, all right? So the sand is kind of like the, I like to think of this as kind of just like your life, like your personal stuff, even like your self-care stuff, you know, like going to the gym and exercising. This could even be something like I scheduled a dodgeball game, right? Like it's something that I want to do. It's going to be fun. It's going to give me energy to like just go throw some stuff at people and like, you know, have fun with friends, like not really have to think about something. Like that's kind of like your sand, right? Like if you have an exam the next day and you're like in deep water and you're definitely going to fail it, like you probably focus on the little rock, which is studying, versus the sand of going to that. But the sand is something to plan in there too. So exercising, you can go as far as planning out when you're going to eat every day. So like when you're going to get lunch, then you can like plan to even get lunch with somebody, right? You can plan personal growth time. When are you going to read? When are you going to watch a TED Talk? And this can be like your miscellaneous stuff too, like laundry, going to call mom, right? When it comes to things like that, I like to try to multitask too, right? So like if I ever had, so to do laundry, let's say it takes like 2.5 hours to do laundry, right? Or 3 hours to do laundry, depending on, you know, the washer and stuff. Well, if I have like a 3-hour block of study time, I would like put in my like stuff into the washer, study while it's going, take a 5-minute break to go switch it over, study while it's drying. Like I can do 2 things at once, right? Whenever I need to call people, I figure out, for me, I'm like, when am I going to be driving? Like that's when I call everybody. I call my mom when I'm driving. I call my dad when I'm driving. Call my sister if I needed to talk to her. Like I don't like call people like at work. Like I just call them on my way or on my way back, right? So I like to kind of multitask. Like I kind of think about it like that too. But your sand is that personal stuff. It's, you know, when am I going to exercise? When am I going to do things that give me energy, like refuel, all that stuff. And then the last and final thing to put in the schedule is these are your not important and not urgent things, okay? These are this is like the water. You're putting everything in a jar. This is the Netflix, the social media, naps, video games. If I showed you, and by the way, guys, it's okay to have these things in here, right? Like I'm not saying that you should not have fun, like never sleep. Like I'm not saying quit Netflix, okay? But it shouldn't be something that takes away from those important things, because that's how you get stressed, right? When you watch too much Netflix and then you neglect something that you have to do for school, that's how you get overwhelmed, and that's what causes you to feel stressed. So all of these things are totally fine to have in your schedule. In fact, that's what makes life a little bit fun, you know? Like being able to just watch Netflix and like take your mind off of things. Taking a nap, sometimes you need it. Like if you looked at my planner, I still have some of my planners from when I was in college. I scheduled naps. Like I literally scheduled naps. Probably not every day. I probably didn't have time every day. Sometimes they were 20 minutes, sometimes they were an hour, but I like planned out in my schedule when I would nap.
You feel better when they're scheduled.
I don't know, they feel pretty good just randomly too. But,
Right.
but what I will
I don't even feel any guilt.
what I will say is that when I've scheduled a nap, I'm less likely to oversleep my like nap time, right? I'm less likely to click snooze from a nap because I like scheduled it, right? It's like my body just is like knows. It's like, Courtney, you're supposed to be doing something else right now. It's like my body knew, right? So you can schedule your naps, totally, right? And so when it comes to, you know, planning out your time, I think it's almost impossible to have every minute of every day planned out, right? And I think sometimes that just gets overwhelming because if one thing kind of gets off, it just you feel really stressed because of that. But if you make an effort to plan and then you have the discipline to stick to it the majority of the time, it reduces your stress levels tremendously, right? And so remember that stress is something that you create for yourself, and it's something that you choose to feel. So by planning out your time, you're going to have less of that, right? Anytime you do feel stressed, by the way, just give yourself some perspective. Like, take a pause. It's that, like, emotional intelligence concept that we've talked about, right? It's like, hey, if I'm stressed, it's like, let me take a step back. Let me become aware. What's making me feel stressed? Is this real, right? Sometimes we feel stressed because of literally nothing, right? It's like everything's fine and someone like bumps into you and all of a sudden you like feel stressed, right? It's like stress is something sometimes that actually makes no sense. And so when you do feel stressed, because sometimes the plan, it falls through, sometimes it just doesn't work out the way we thought it was going to do, something took more time, whatever it is, but take a step back and be like, hey, how did I get here? What's making me feel stressed? How can I respond to eliminate that stress? And using the emotional intelligence part of that. When you don't let things stress you out too, like with the things that you need to do, you're actually way better at doing them, right? Like if I studied for exams stressed, I would only be thinking about like, oh my God, I'm so stressed because of this exam. But if I was just like, I've got plenty of time, then I would have plenty of time and I wouldn't feel super stressed, right? And so a lot of it is that mentality, it's that perception and that perspective that we give ourselves with what's going on. So after doing this, I know we didn't get a chance to plan everything out, but I hope it kind of gave you some clarity on how to do this. How does it feel to do this? How does it feel to do a power hour, like map out your schedule, make your plan? Anyone want to share? Joe?
I actually kind of feel like, honestly, like actually kind of relieved, like having everything out on paper.
Mm-hmm. Relief. Cool. I like that feeling. John?
Not gonna lie, I feel a little more stressed than I was before I came into this.
Really?
But, I mean, it's not as much as
Mhm.
like, you know, like I see like the stress on the paper, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like really
Yeah. Cool.
And John, by the way, that's normal. A lot of times when I do the mental download, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get all this done. Like, how is this so big? And so I do feel like that at the beginning. Do you guys know how to work through that?
Just do it.
You gotta you gotta finish the power hour of prioritizing, like picking out what is actually important this week and what actually is time sensitive. And sometimes I have to decide what just isn't gonna happen this week, right?
Mhm.
And making those decisions. And I've never had a week where I can get everything done that I need to do. It's impossible for me. So I have to just pick and choose and eliminate things from my list, or maybe put them on the list for next week. And then number 2 is you've got to get it all written out in your schedule.
Mhm.
So if you haven't finished through the power hour, I can totally relate to that, and that's actually a normal feeling. You just haven't had a chance to complete the process yet.
Does anyone feel kind of like they just have like a little bit more control, a little bit more of a grasp, right? Because you're not kind of letting like your time run you, like you're running your time, right? You're choosing what you're going to spend your time on. So, like I said, I know we didn't get it all done. I hope this either like taught you something new or just helped you kind of like revisit something that you already knew and just gave you a little bit of motivation to actually plan out your time. But it's something that's so, so, so important. A smart person once said, time is money, so don't waste it. And that's prep.
Nice. We